Hi and welcome back to Mondays with Kamande. My name is Kamande Esther, and if this is your first time, karibu sana. If this is not your first time, thank you so much for making this your home, for making this a channel where you always come back to. Thank you for your support. Thank you for helping us and being available and being and existing, because it's through you that we get to fulfill our mandate. It's because of you that we get to fulfill our purpose. So karibuni sana. I have realized that of late I've just been having content ideas from God that are feeling, or content ideas that look like conversation starters, and I wanted to have another conversation starter today, or the conversation that I wanted us to have today is a conversation that is, one, very close to my heart, and secondly, it's a conversation that a lot of us need to have, whether within ourselves or with people around us, because it's a conversation that is really, it's a season, or it's things that we go through every single day. It's either something that you're going through, something that you're coming out of, or something that you are about to go into. And it's a conversation about waiting on God and obedience. And I wanted to just be a little bit personal today and just go a little bit in depth and just open up a part of my life on this channel, so that it can resonate with someone who's watching this. And this video, let me begin by saying that this episode is for someone who has received an instruction from God. You either received an instruction from God and you are yet to obey that instruction, or you received an instruction from God or a promise from God and you're waiting on that instruction to manifest, or the reward or the outcome of that instruction to manifest, or you're just coming out of it. So if you're coming out of such a season, I hope this video resonates with you after you have gone through what you've gone through. Or if you're currently in that season, then I pray that this will be a video that will encourage you, a video that will inspire your heart or draw your heart closer to God, so that you can wait effectively, so that you can see the fulfillment of whatever it is that God has asked you to do or is asking you to wait for. I wanted to share a small story, and this is just a story time video. And I wanted to share a story time about just a recent season that I got into, and a season that I'm still in. And one of the desires of my heart is to create or to share content or to share things that I'm learning in my walk with God, not to be too abstract, to just, to be authentic and to be real with you, so that you can resonate, and to show you that indeed walking with God, this is what walking with God looks like, or this is what it can look like. I have been, my story time begins here. I have been a full-time consultant now for a year, 5 months, if I'm counting correctly. And I ventured or launched my full-time consultancy career at the beginning of 2023. And it was one of those decisions that, one, it was an answered prayer for me. I knew for a long time, and this is something that I was just thinking about recently, and just going back in time and just wondering, when did this dream to become a consultant begin? And I remember at the time, the dream started back in 2018. And I knew that I wanted to do full-time consultancy in communication and media. That's my area of expertise. And at the time, I knew and I received the vision to begin the consultancy firm that now God is building. And I knew I wanted to start that consultancy firm back in 2018. That's when I received the vision. And that was when I received the word to begin that I would eventually become a full-time consultant. At the time in 2018, and I'm laughing right now, but at the time it was so painful. But at the time when I received that word, I didn't have the maturity to interpret God's visions. I didn't have the maturity to understand that God can give you a vision and can give you a word today, but it's a word that is going to be fulfilled 5 years to come, or 10 years to come, or 20 years to come. And this reminds me of the story of Abraham. When he received the promise that he would get his own son, he didn't know when it would happen, and he thought it would happen immediately or maybe after a year or so after receiving the word. But it's a promise that came to be fulfilled over 20 years. I think it's after 25 years. And some of the promises and some of the visions that God gives us and shows us are visions that are going to happen either immediately. Some of them will happen immediately based on the intensity or the urgency of that vision. Some of them are going to happen maybe after 2 years or after 5 years. So mine, I received it and I thought, oh good, sasa Mungu amenionekania. God has decided this young girl is no longer going to be employed. She's going to be a business mogul. She's going to be this top consultant, sought after consultant. And I had the vision and I knew what I wanted to become and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew the industry that I was in at the time. But looking back, I was not mature spiritually to get into such a space career-wise. I didn't have the maturity to birth or to cultivate that vision and to cultivate that promise, that word that God had given to me. At the time, I didn't know that when you receive a word from God, you have to go into an intense season of prayer and fasting and praying and just fighting so that word can come to life. I did not know about it. So what did Esther do? Esther received the vision from God. Esther resigned from her job. At the time, I was working for an organization that was amazing. I loved working there. But I had gotten to a place where I felt my my job was just repetitive and I wanted something completely different. And so I thought, instead of looking for a job in the corporate sector, let me just start this consultancy firm that God has showed me. And I resigned from work. I didn't renew my contract. It was contract based, so I didn't renew it. And I thought, okay, now we are set for life. This is us. We are going to be, hey, my mother is going to live well. My family is going to live well. And I resigned and I registered the business. I registered the consultancy firm. God had already given me the name. I knew the name I wanted to use at the time for the business. I knew on surface level, on paper, I knew the kind of services that I wanted and I needed to provide. And this was just on paper. And I'm saying on paper because I was just fresh from campus. I had just been out of campus I had just completed my undergraduate degree and I had just stayed for less than 4 years. Yeah, it was just less than 4 years because I cleared in 2015 and then now this is 2018. Yeah, less than 4 years actually. And the experience, the work experience that I had acquired within those 3 years, they were not, that work experience was not enough to sustain or to start a business or to become an entrepreneur. I hope you're getting where I'm going with this. But at the time, I didn't know. I didn't know that this is what I needed to do. I needed work experience. I needed relevant work experience, actually. I needed to be at a certain level, maturity-wise, spiritually, mentally as well, as a person. I didn't know these things. All I knew was that I have received a vision from God and I am going to be the top, most sought and looked for. Those consultants that the government looks The government looks for these consultants, and I had that dream. I still have that dream. But at the time I had a dream and I was very naive, spiritually and even naturally. I was naive to think that once you step out and once you start this consultancy firm, people are supposed to come looking for you. How dare they not come looking for you? How hawajui the value that you carry. Hey, I was so full of hope and full of this naive excitement because, I was starting a business. It was something that I had not seen in my family. When it comes to business, my family's or the businesses we start are completely different, or the businesses that I've seen in my family are different from what I was about to do. So I was so excited. So here comes 2018, I've resigned, and then I have sent some pitches, some proposals, and I get my first pitch meeting. Let me call it a pitch meeting, and I go for this meeting, and that was the meeting that really opened my eyes in terms of understanding that I was not ready to implement or to run with the vision that God had given to me. And so I go into this season, I go into this meeting, and as I'm speaking about the services and speaking about the consultancy firm, and I'm telling this potential client, and I'm so full of confidence, and I'm really psyched up to pitch and show them how we are going to solve the problems they have. And I'm speaking and telling them about the company, and I'm telling them about what we can do, what I can do for his company. And he looks at me and he's wondering, and he asked me a question. The first question he asked me was, Esther, instead of hiring you as a consultant, why don't I hire you as a staff member, as a team member in my staff, as, let me just employ you? And I looked at him, and first of all, I was very offended. Nimetumia, like, I've spent so much time explaining to you how I'm a consultant and how I'm well versed in ABCD, these services. We're going to do PR for you, we're going to do marketing and all this, and you're asking me to be an employee in your company. At the time, I didn't have the wisdom to inquire and find out, okay, why do you see me? What part of my presentation made you want to hire me as an employee instead of a consultant? So I just listened, and he was just explaining to me about how I can benefit his team, how I can be a valuable addition to his team. And the meeting ended with us discussing. Imagine, like, I walked into the meeting knowing that I'm going to bag a client. I'm going to walk out. I'm pursuing this bag. I'm walking out with this client, potential client, long-term retainer contract. But then when that was my mindset when I was walking into the meeting. But when I was leaving, the conversation was different. The conversation had turned, and now he was asking me to consider and tell him how much my salary expectation would be and when I was ready to begin working for him. And I walked out, and I felt such a heavy sense of discouragement and a heavy sense of offense, because I was wondering how, which part of my conversation, which part of my presentation made this gentleman sit and think to himself that he can hire me, that he wants, instead of hiring me as a consultant, I should be part of his team. I should be a certain, a marketing officer or a communication officer in his company. And I walked away really troubled, and I was like, okay, that is one client. At the time I was just listening to business people. And one thing business people will always tell you is that, you're going to go through so many no's before you can finally land a yes. And I was ready. I thought I had prepared myself mentally for the no's. But then when I walked away, I was like, okay, that's just one no. Let me try again and try again and try again. But remember, I have resigned, and I'm thinking about this consultancy firm, and my mind was focused on getting clients. And I didn't know that there was a lot more that I needed to do when it comes to this vision that God has given to me. Than I thought. I thought I'd just receive this vision and just, go straight into work and get all these clients, and life would, unfold so easily. I didn't know there was a lot that goes into birthing a vision. I didn't know there's a waiting season that was waiting for me, and that waiting season was painful. 2018, the entire 2018, and I think I've talked about that year so much on this channel, because it was the year that birthed Mondays with Kamande. It was the year where Mondays with Kamande was birthed. It was the year where I really stepped into my purpose and discovered what my purpose was. At the time when I'm receiving this vision from God so that I can now start implementing it now in 2018, I thought I knew what God had called me to do, but I honestly did not know. I had no idea what my purpose was. All I knew was that this is the career that I went to school to study, and my parents took me to school, and this is what I studied, and this is what I want to do in my career. That's what I thought, and that's what I was holding on to. And so here comes 2018, that client, and I know God is faithful. Today I can say that God is faithful, because he did not allow me to get any other client that I'd go to pitch to. And I'll get into this and we'll unpack this as I continue with my story time. And God shut doors on me, and I know it's God who shut doors on me, because surely God is so powerful. If he wanted a door opened for me in that season, he would have opened the doors. But the fact that I did not get any open door during that season is proof enough that it was God who was holding me back. And for a whole year in 2018, God did not build capacity in me that relates to, business or my career. It was the year that he built a spiritual capacity in me. And it was when I started getting closer to God, getting to understand God, understanding that you can have a relationship with God. So that specific year, that for me, when I was going through it, it felt like the wilderness season for me. Honestly, it felt like the wilderness season for me. And it was a difficult season. It was a painful season because I had a lot of unlearning to do. I had a lot of learning new things, to learn new things. I had a lot of new things that I needed to learn. The way I thought I knew God is not how God really wanted me to know Him. And it was in this specific waiting season that God worked in me, removed certain character traits in me and personality beliefs or mindsets that I had, because mindset, personality, the way you think, oh, I'm an introvert, this is what I cannot do, this is what I can do, this is and we keep blaming all these mindsets and belief systems on our personalities until God comes and starts shaking things up in your life, and you start understanding that, hey, what I used to think was a personality trait is actually a very toxic and an unhealthy trauma response. So it was in that season that God was now beginning to work in my life and beginning to work in my heart and in my mind, and showing me things and revealing to me things that I was holding on to, and certain beliefs that I was holding on to, and certain desires that I was holding on to that I thought were a natural thing to hold on to. But then now He was questioning them and provoking and triggering and undoing so many things. And that process of being undone is really painful. I don't know if you've had a wound and then you're going for dressing. When they're changing the dressing, your wounds dressing in the hospital, or even at home, when you're changing the dressing on your wound and you have to reapply the antiseptic and all these ointments that are supposed to heal your wound. That process is not funny, and that process is not easy. It's not sweet. It's a very painful process, and it's the same thing with God. And something that I learned in that season is that a lot of the greatest work that God does in our lives is internal, and it's spiritual. He begins His work from our spiritual person. He begins the spiritual work first before He can now begin to work on the outward. And He wants, and now I know why. I finally understand why God does that, because everything that we see in the natural world has a spiritual backing to it. There's a statement or a phrase that is usually thrown around online, that life is spiritual, and true, life is spiritual. And the Bible actually says that everything that we can see right now was created from the spiritual world, spiritual realm. Everything that we are right now started from the spiritual, spiritual world, spiritual realm. Those are so many R's. And where I come from, hey, R's, R-A-R-O. So I did not understand that God needed to build me up spiritually first before now I can become the version that He was showing me back in 2018. And whoever it is that He was showing me in 2018 is who I am today now in 2024. How many years are those? Close to 5 years. Close to 5 years, 6 years later, or 5 years later. And after that season of waiting on God, for 2018, I thought that, okay, now I've waited on God, and now that I've learned these spiritual lessons, and now I have grown spiritually to a certain extent, okay, now then I'm now ready to now launch this consultancy firm once again. And shock on me, God took me back to employment. And He took me back to employment in 2019. And I thought, okay, God, what are you trying? What are you trying? Hizi ni gani sasa? And so that you know that your life, there's a point you get to with God where your life is no longer your own and you cannot dictate where to go and how to live your life. That was me in 2019. And I remember the job that I got was a slight percentage of what I had gone to school to do. And so here I am with a degree in communication and media, but I'm working in administration. I'm working in as an executive assistant. I'm working as an admin. I'm working in operations. And I'm wondering, what has my career and what has my life got to do with all these roles and responsibilities that I'm getting? And my position at the time, the job roles and the job description that I had at the time, the positions that I had at the time put me in close proximity with the bosses, with the CEO, with the managers, with the bosses. And I kept thinking, okay, but I'm serving them. I'm just here to support and offer and provide. My role was really support based. And for me at the time, it felt, God, you're so unfair. God, you are so unfair, because I have a whole degree sitting in my house, but God, this work experience, I need work experience in communication and media. I need experience in journalism. I need experience in media. I need experience doing other things that are communication based and related. But you're putting me in a position now, here I am, I'm listening to conversations, and I have to be part of conversations when the bosses are discussing strategy, when the bosses are discussing setting up the business, setting up funds, setting up all these things. And I was privy to so many conversations, and I had access to so many intense leadership conversations, and so many conversations about starting businesses, how to manage a business, how to run a business, what to look out for when you're investing in a business. And I had access to all these conversations, and at the time it felt so draining and so frustrating because it wasn't what I wanted to do. Yet God has positioned me in that specific position, in those specific roles. And I tried so much to get myself out of those positions, looking for a job in the field that I wanted to be in. I remember applying for jobs in media houses. I remember I was applying for jobs connected or related to communication. And at the time it felt, God, why are you shutting these doors on me? God, this is not what I want to do. I want to be in this other side. And it was in those moments that God was speaking to me and telling me, I need you to trust me, and I need you to follow how I'm leading you, and I know what I am doing. And I remember God telling me, Esther, I know what I am doing with you, so just trust me. And one of the key lessons that God taught me at that time was how to maximize the seasons. And I remember wondering, God, why are you asking me to maximize this season? God, nini ninafunzwa? What is this that I'm being taught, and what is this season that I need to maximize on? Like, it felt so mundane, it felt so trivial for me, and it felt so and it was an unfair positioning for me at the time when I was thinking about it. That's how I felt. But nonetheless, I obeyed and I stayed. And when I was just listening to those conversations, and I didn't know that my subconscious mind was just taking in those principles and the lessons I was learning and the work that I was now being asked to do and the conversations I was involved in. I didn't know that these would be conversations that 5 years down the line would be the conversations that are bringing food and placing food on my table. And I thought, and what I thought I needed was actually not what I needed in that particular time. So here I am coming from a season of being unemployed, because I was the whole of 2018, I was so unemployed. I was so unemployment, and then being unemployed, that was me. And I didn't have any opportunity to get a job in 2018. So I was just busy with God, and He was busy just building my spiritual capacity. Then here comes 2019, and I'm going somewhere with this story time. Here comes 2019, and God is exposing me to this work environment that is building my capacity when it comes to work and when it comes to my skills, my intellectual skills. And God is opening me up. Now He was opening me up to skills that I didn't learn in school, because I didn't do a business degree. There are certain business principles that I did not have. There's a business acumen, there's a business persona that I needed to learn and adopt that I didn't have the opportunity to learn and adopt when I was in school. So in school, what I learned were the skills and all these communication skills and media skills. But now when it comes to running a business and operating a business, that wasn't taught in school. And I needed these skills so that now the consultancy firm can make sense. And I remember at the time God was exposing me to this conversation, I was in rooms with key decision makers, and I could see how leaders make decisions. I could see how my boss was making decisions. I could see how he works, how he pays attention to details. To date, that is one of my bosses that I truly admire and honor, because in as much as his training on me was hard and really painful, it produced a version of me that is now sustaining what God wanted to do through my life. And it was in those moments that I learned so many business principles, so many lessons about, even handling clients, how to pitch, how to present yourself as a business person, how to communicate with other business people, how to go looking for funding and looking for resources. Those are things that I did not know when I was in school or when I was in the previous workplace. And these are things these are lessons and principles that I needed to have for me now to become the consultant that God had showed me I would become. And so here I am now in 2019, and then now God is now building all these things. And then now we go into a season, the COVID hit at the time, and I transitioned into a different company. And now in this other company, it was now when I got to understand my burden when it comes, because now when you're starting a business, you need to have the product or the service that you're going to exchange in for value. You need to give something so that you can get money. That's just business. And then you need to know who you're serving. And yes, I got these business principles and I got these lessons from my previous boss in 2019. But now in 2020, I'm in a different company. The transition is a whole other episode on itself. But here I am in a new environment, and I'm learning about now a target market, and I'm learning about, I'm getting exposed to people who have businesses, and I'm now being exposed to learning, and I'm learning how to look for gaps, and I'm learning about who I want to serve. And when you're starting a business, whether you have a business that is product-based, or whether it's a service-based business, or whether you're in consultancy like myself, you're taught, or you have to have someone or a target audience or a target client, target customers. And that is what I did not have. So this final place where I got to work, to be employed, was the missing piece to now the journey, the wilderness waiting journey that God had been taking me through. And it was also another job position that had nothing to do with what I went to school to study. And it was at that point, I think I got to a place and I was asking God, okay, so ile degree yenye nilipata, what are we going to do with that degree? What are we going to do with those skills and those the knowledge and information that I had from school? What are we going to do with that? Because now this is another job. It has nothing to do, it's not related to what I went to school to study, yet it's so relevant to my life today. And in that particular job position, I got to understand the heart of entrepreneurs. I got to learn about entrepreneurs. I got to learn about entrepreneurship. I got to learn about the struggles that people go through when they're starting their own businesses. And I got my not holy grail, I got my sweet spot when it comes to entrepreneurship. At that particular point, I started learning, and I could see the gap in the market, or the gap in the industry, or the gap in the world that I wanted to be part of. I wanted to be part of the solution providers that were filling this gap. And it's the gap that has to do with supporting entrepreneurs. And for me, that was my goal. That was my desire. And it was in that, I think the minute I figured out why God wanted me to be in that particular job or job position, or in that particular company, that was the day, and that was the beginning now of God birthing and reminding me about the consultancy firm. So in 2020, I remember I was just in my house and I had come from work, and I remember in just my quiet time with God, I remember God telling me, this is the last place you're going to be employed. And at the time it didn't make sense, because I was barely 5 months, or 3 months actually, I was barely 3 months old in this company, and yet God is telling me this is the last place you're going to be employed. And it did not make sense at the time. But for me at the time, because of what I had gone through, there are certain experiences you can go through with God that now you begin to shield yourself from going through them again. Have you gone through pain? You go through such painful seasons and painful moments, and you get to a place where when you think about going through another painful season, you're like, let me take my time. Let me take my sweet time. I don't need God to tell me to wait. I will do the waiting by myself. I will tell myself to wait. And I remember that time hearing that, and I dismissed it, and I was like, that can't be God. I mean, how is God telling me this is the last place I'm going to be employed? Yet already I have a dream, and I have an idea of how I want to grow in the corporate world. I had completely forgotten and given up on the consultancy firm. When it did not work out in 2018, I just shelved it and I forgot about it, and life moved on. So here we are in 2020, and God tells me, hey Esther, this is the last place you're going to be employed. And if you've watched several videos in this channel, you know how big I am on hearing the voice of God. And so at the time I was like, this cannot be God, because I know what I want to grow into. And I went on and I dismissed it and I went on. Then I think after a month or so later, God repeats the same instruction again. He's like, Esther, this is the last place you're going to be employed, so maximize on the lessons and the principles I'm going to highlight. And at the time, again, it did not make sense, but the way one of the ways I know that God speaks to us is that he keeps on nudging us and keeps dropping promptings, and he keeps dropping hints here and there. And I remember just thinking, okay, if this is God, then I'm just going to maximize this season, but I'm not going to hold on to it thinking that I'm not going to get out or exit from this company until God says it's time to exit. And I held on to that. I made that decision, wrote down the vision that God had given me and what he had said about this being the last company that I was going to be employed. And I wrote it down and closed that book and moved on with my life. And we started surviving COVID. And that COVID season for me was a learning experience on its own and for all of us. And here comes COVID. And then here comes now the 2021. God is not speaking anything about the consultancy firm. And in 2021, the instruction that God gave was about the book. So we wrote the book. I wrote the book, worked on the book, published it, and I was so happy. I was so happy because in as much as my job was routine-based and it was just a repetitive cycle, I had an outlet. I had Mondays with Commanded on YouTube was started in 2020. I had that creative outlet for me, and that was my greatest desire. As a creative, you need an outlet. You need a way of expressing yourself. You need to feel like you're creating something. So for me, YouTube and the book and the blog, I knew I had that avenue to express myself. So my job wasn't really frustrating as much because I knew after my 9 to 5, I can go create content, I can write, I can do ABCD. And then now we published the book, and then here comes God in 2022, and he's like, remember what I told you about the consultancy firm? And remember what I told you about this place being the last place you will be employed? I need you to start preparing yourself to exit. And I thought I was going crazy, and I thought this was not God, and I started rebuking that voice because we are just coming from COVID, and the company I was working for was an amazing company, and it had the financial muscle to carry us through the pandemic. And we knew that now after the pandemic we were recovering, and there was that job security and that stability that came with a job. And it was an amazing environment, and I knew I was enjoying my time at that company. But then here comes God, and one thing about God is when it's time for you to do what he has called you to do, Aki, you will not know peace. There's a certain restlessness that comes with God's vision. When it's time to birth the vision, there's a restlessness that comes with it that you cannot ignore, that you cannot do away with. So my entire 2022 literally was full of prayer and fasting and bathing. Prayer, fasting, bathing, that was the cycle. I was either praying and fasting or in meetings with God, just creating and finding out and identifying how are we setting up this consultancy firm. And now the difference, and I know someone would be now asking me, what was the difference between now in 2022 and 2018 when it comes to birthing the vision? And the difference now was that I had a clear purpose. I knew what God wanted to do with my life as a person in my purpose, original purpose. God had already revealed that to me, and he was connecting that purpose to my career. He was connecting that purpose to what I do with content. He was connecting that purpose with my relationships and associations and my role in the family. And I knew this is what God has called me to do. I knew what God had called me to do. And he was just looking for a way to express that purpose through my career. And now in 2022, when now we're birthing and coming back now with a consultancy firm, I was coming back with a consultancy firm that was founded on a purpose from God, and it had a clear vision, and I knew who I wanted to serve, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew the agenda of God that I wanted to fulfill with that consultancy firm. And because God knew I would delay, and God knew I was going to dilly-dally and hold on to this safety net of my employment, God began now sending me people, clients, people, the ideal kind of clients that I needed to serve. He started sending them my way. You know, people making inquiries, people who know you and know what you do now, being really interested about how you can work with them, how you can serve them. And one of the things about working with God and walking with God is that integrity, the principle of integrity, and the principle of serving two masters. You cannot be employed and then you're serving as a consultant, and it's the same connected, you're in this, like, it's the same thing. It feels like you're cheating on one. And at that time, in that particular moment, I knew that I needed to make a decision, but I could not make the decision without an exit, a green flag from God. And I knew, and I told God, I was telling God, I'm only going to let go of this employment and I'm only going to resign when you tell me it's time to resign. When you tell me, Sister, this is how you're going to walk out, then that is the day that I'm going to resign. Anyway, that is how I exited, is a whole other story. But the essence of this story time was I did finally exit. And now this brings me back now to the current season. I walked out of employment and I let go of the safety net that comes with employment. When you're employed, you have the safety net of insurance, you have medical insurance, you have a pension scheme, you have the security of knowing that at the end of the month, you're going to get a paycheck, you're going to get your bonus, you're going to get your benefits, you're going to get all these perks that come with being employed. Now here comes 2023 and I've walked out of employment and I have let go of that employment. And I told you it was an answered prayer, because at the time God placed a burden in my heart of freedom. I felt like when I'm employed, I don't have the freedom to spend more time with God in terms of creating content. I felt limited when it comes to how I talk about my content, how I post about my content, how I show up in the online spaces, because I'm representing a certain company. And so kuna hile, there's that conflict of you're representing a certain company brand, yet you're doing something completely different. And there's that tension that comes with, when you're a representative of a certain company and yet you're doing something completely different. So there was that tension. And I felt the need to be free to do this, free to just control what I do with my career. Long story. But I remember at that particular time, walking out and now fully launching my consultancy firm in 2023 with this idea that God has given me a promise and God has given me a word and God has given me a vision. And I walked out, and when you're in business, you need, the way you're taught about a pipeline of clients. So I knew I had a few clients that I could reach out to. I knew I had a few clients I was already serving at the time. And I didn't know, and I didn't have the fear. And I knew, actually, that's what I wanted to say. I knew that it was either going to work or it was going to work. I walked out of employment knowing and still remembering what God told me about that being the last place I would be employed. So I knew whatever God was doing with this consultancy career, it either had to work or work. And I knew that I needed to be I knew that it had to work because I had no plan B. I did not have a plan B. I didn't have, the way we have, you have an inheritance waiting for you and an allowance, and you have a trust fund as a child. Honestly, may God help us so that we can be those parents who create trust funds for our children. But for some of us, we don't have that plan B. We don't have that safety net from where we come from. As a matter of fact, you are probably the safety net for your family. You are the one you're the one who's covering your family, you're the one who's taking care of your family. And that was my situation at the time. And then now here comes God and he's asking you to resign, and you're resigning to go and do what? How are you going to explain to your parents that, hey, by the way, God has asked me to resign, and I'm resigning so that I can do ABCD. I'm resigning so that I can now do full-time consultancy. This is something that your parents have never heard about this. Our parents are wired to know the traditional forms of employment. You go to an office at 8 a.m. and unatokea 5 p.m. and you either work on the weekends or you don't. That's what they understand work to be. So here comes a vision that God has given you, and you're trying to explain it. Number one, trying to explain a vision that God has given you to people is the hardest thing that you will ever have to do. And if you're in that season where you feel like you need to explain God's vision or the vision that God has given to you, please just drop the ball. Just do not even bother explaining it. And when I walked into 2023, and I knew that now I was doing this consultancy full-time, and I knew that I had no plan B, I was not ready for another waiting season. I was not ready for a challenge when it comes to my obedience to God. And I'm saying a challenge because you get to a place where, and that's why it's important to walk out or to get into a season that God has led you into, because the grace to stay in that season is already available for you. God has made all these provisions. He has His grace, His mercy, His favor is upon you for that particular season, if He's the one who has led you into that season. And I'm saying there's an advantage to that, because when you're waiting on God, when you're in that season of waiting on God, there's a temptation to think about that waiting season as punishment. There's a temptation to think of it as, hey God, I did not hear you correctly. Hey God, nilikusikia kweli ama ni stories zangu tu nilijiambia? Was it my own subconscious mind, or was it a desire, or was it a self-led decision that I made? And at the time, what would make me, or whatever it is that keeps me grounded to date, is the journey that God walked with me in that waiting season. This entire story time that I've given you was an entire journey and it was a process that God used to train me on how to listen to His voice, and how to know when it's Him who's speaking to me, and how to vet the word that He gives me, or to vet whatever it is that I hear in my spirit. And whatever it is that keeps me grounded is the fact that throughout the entire year of 2022, God was helping me process how to begin this business. He was helping me process what to do, where to set up the business, how to position myself when it comes to our marketing content, what to do, how to approach clients. So God was helping me analyze and process this word and this vision, and process and get myself out of exit employment. And it was a whole year of God working with me and processing and helping and preparing my heart. So each time I'm in this waiting season, and I'm looking at how business is unfolding, and I'm looking at how you'll go for a month or 2 months without a client, without even an inquiry. You don't even have anyone knocking on your door to ask you, but they hata simtuambie how much you charge. You are looking, you're starting these initiatives and they don't bear fruit. You're getting rejection emails from clients. You're pitching your services and you're getting rejected. And then here comes another month where you're doing really well and you're getting clients back to back. So it's a roller coaster when it comes to this side of business, or this side of my career. And when those moments that are really difficult, when they come up, I have the evidence of what God processed, or how God prepared me. And if I had not been in a season where I was waiting on Him to tell me, now it's time for you to exit, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have those things those confirmations and the assurances that I can hold on to. In the Bible, when God was calling Gideon to now lead an army to fight, Gideon is one of the people who encourages me a lot, because he teaches me that it's okay to ask God to confirm His word, because we cannot trust ourselves. The Bible says the heart of man is so deceitful. So imagine if you're relying on your own wisdom and understanding and relying on your own heart, utajidanganya, you're going to lead yourself astray. And so it's important for you to understand that it's okay to ask God to confirm whatever it is that you're hearing. If it's a word from Him, He's going to confirm it. And He's never tired. He will never get tired of confirming His word to you. And so I remembered asking God to confirm and to give me confirmations, and He did. He gave me confirmation in forms of dreams. He gave me confirmation in forms of people that I would meet, strangers that I would meet, and they would confirm what God had said. He would give me confirmation through prophetic words I would receive from my pastor. And it was in a season where my pastor did not even actually know what I was going through. It's one of those seasons you're going through, just you and God. And then here comes your pastor, he's confirming, and he gives you a word that resonates with what God is telling you. A stranger comes, and someone you don't know, someone you've completely never opened up to, and they're confirming something that God has been speaking to your heart. And so I had those proofs. Yeah, I had those proofs. I had that evidence, and I had written them down. So each time I feel discouraged, each time I feel like the weight of this new path is heavy, I go back to that notebook and I go through whatever I was writing and what I was going through, and it reaffirms and reassures me to keep on going. And the reason I'm saying, and the reason I've given this lengthy story time, is so that I can encourage someone who's in a waiting season, someone who's looking at their waiting season and thinking, God, why have you positioned me in this place? Remember, for me, I would interpret the job positions and the job roles that God was giving me as really bare minimum. You know, you're like, God, why are you giving me this role? I deserve better. You know, that's what we end up thinking. Like, God, why am I in this position? And now I feel like I'm just serving them, and there's no greater impact I'm making other than just providing support. And if I had not been in those specific rooms, if I had not been in those conversations, I would not have learned what I know now when it comes to running a business. I needed to learn how to run a business. I needed how to learn how to handle clients, how to help clients know how to run their businesses. I needed to understand how to develop strategy for businesses. And that was what I had access to getting and had access to learning when I was in those conversations. And if I had just focused on what I wanted to do with my career, I would never, and trust me, I would never have learned how to do that. And these are the principles and these are the foundational lessons that are now helping me in my career. They're helping me now show up effectively for the clients that God is bringing my way. If I had not gone through that waiting season, I would not have learned how impatient I am with people. I was very impatient with people. I think I still am, but I'm learning. And when now you're in this other side of consultancy and you're dealing with people, you really need to be patient with people. You have to be patient with people, because one minute they're thinking ABCD is going to help them. Tomorrow they call you and you're in a meeting and it's a follow-up meeting and they come up with something completely different, and you cannot beat them up. You cannot shout at them. You cannot throw a tantrum in the boardroom when you're in these conversations. You just have to sit patiently and now process the new changes with them. If I had not gone through what I went through, I would not have understood that the battles I'm now fighting, the battles that I have to fight today as a career person, I'm fighting battles that are connected to me as a person, for my own business, and then I have to fight for my clients. I have to fight battles connected to my clients. Why? Because they're also birthing visions that are connected to God's purpose for their lives. And if I'm serving them, then whatever battles and whatever attacks they get, or whatever attacks have been directed towards them, are going to affect me as well, and they're going to affect the nature of the work or the projects that we're working together. So spiritually, I am fighting double wars. I'm fighting the war when it comes to my own life and my own career and my own business, and then I'm also fighting with and for my clients. And that is something that I needed a lot of spiritual strength. My capacity spiritually needed to be expanded, and that only happened when I was waiting on God. And it's still happening, because I'm still waiting on God. What am I waiting on God for? I'm waiting on God to see the manifestation of the vision that He showed me when it comes to this consultancy career. I'm waiting on God to see the fulfillment of the promises He has showed me. And even now, when I'm waiting on God, there are certain things that I keep on learning. I'm learning a lot when it comes to building businesses. It's not just sitting down and deciding this is what we're going to sell and this is the price we're going to put on the product and the service, and then we're going to make money. There is a lot that goes into running a business, and these are things I wouldn't have learned when it comes to if I had not gone through what I went through with God. And so I wanted to just share this part of my life to encourage someone. I may not know which part of the season you're in. You're probably either getting into a waiting season, or you're about to exit that waiting season, or you're currently in that waiting season. You're going to face a lot of temptation when it comes to sticking to your obedience, remaining in that place of obedience. The devil is going to question the word that God gave you. He's going to make you doubt the word that God gave you. He's going to make you doubt the vision that God gave you. He's going to make you doubt the circumstances that you're in, and you're going to start feeling resentful towards God. And I'm preparing you, and I'm telling you this because it's going to happen. It's a reality that comes with waiting on God and obeying God. There is a point you're going to get to where you're going to question the instructions that God gave you, because things are going to unfold in a different way. The way you're thinking you're supposed to live or when God gives you an instruction, the way you think that that instruction is going to unfold and manifest is not going to happen. It's going to happen according to God's ways. The way God, whatever God tells you, I keep saying God's will is fulfilled in God's ways and in God's timing. So waiting is going to really sharpen your idea, and it's going to question your idea on timing when it comes to God, because you're going to have to align your timing with God's timing, and you will have to be okay with God's timing. And sometimes waiting on God will feel like you're not doing anything. It will feel like God is not doing anything. It will feel like God has forgotten about you. It's like he put you in that waiting shelf and then he went to sort out other people. That's how it's going to feel. But I want to encourage you that even in that season where you're feeling like God has forgotten about you, or like God is punishing you with the waiting season, it actually is not. The devil is lying to you. The devil is lying to you that God is punishing you with that waiting season. The devil is lying to you that that waiting season is a wilderness season. It actually is not. It's an opportunity for God to maximize your capacity, to expand your capacity. It's an opportunity for God to teach you new things, to also help you unlearn things that you've been holding on to. And my greatest encouragement or takeaway for this video, and what I hope that you will take away from this video, is that you will have a different perspective towards waiting. You will look at waiting differently. And when you look at waiting as a school, and you look at waiting as an opportunity for you to learn and an opportunity for God to prepare you, then you're going to wait in gratitude, and you're going to stay and hold on to that act of obedience. Because one thing about God is that he is too faithful to allow you to be embarrassed. Remember in my first story about the client who asked me to be employed, to employ me, that was, if God had allowed me to go through another pitch meeting or another meeting when I was not prepared, when I didn't have the capacity, I would have been embarrassed. I would have been humiliated again by a client, because I wouldn't have had the capacity, and I wouldn't have been ready to handle whatever it is that God wanted me to handle. Truthfully, when I look back, I was not ready to become who I am today. I was not ready to handle what I handle today back then. And even now, there are certain things that God has showed me, and I know that I am not yet ready to handle that version, to handle that amount of work. And in as much as I want, maybe I have a desire to have these big contracts, to work for these big companies as a consultant, I may have that dream and desire, but I also know that I don't have the capacity to handle that. There's still room for me to improve. There's still a lot more work for me to do to get to that version that can handle that. There's a whole version of me that can handle Mondays with Commander when it's a big platform, when it's doing big numbers and we're doing big things, big events. There's that dream that I have. But in this particular moment, I know that I can only desire that. I can only dream about it, but I don't have the capacity, and I don't have the muscle, the stamina to handle that dream or that desire that I have. And when we get to that point of understanding that the waiting season is to build our capacity, then it helps us wait on God more faithfully. It helps us wait on God actively, because you begin to maximize the lessons and you begin to look out for lessons that God is teaching you. And I hope that this video can open up our eyes and open up your eyes and open up your heart to accepting the waiting season that God is going to take you through, or is taking you through, or has just taken you through. Do not resent God because of the waiting season. And do not threaten God. Don't threaten God because of the waiting season. You know, the way we are like, if you don't give me a husband now, I'm not going to serve you anymore. Please don't threaten God. If you're not going to give me these clients, or if you're not going to expand this ministry, if you're not going to do it, and we're threatening God, please do not threaten God. Let's remember that God is God. He is to be feared, he is to be revered, and you cannot threaten him. And you cannot threaten him to do something that you're not ready for, or he's not ready for you to have. Unaweza threaten God. You can threaten God all you want, but if he has said you're not going to, if in his timing you're going to receive that blessing in 2 years, whether you threaten him today or tomorrow, whether you threaten him with 10 threats or 50 threats, it's not going to change the fact that you're going to receive that blessing 2 years from now. So it's up to us to now, humble ourselves and wait on God in humility. So do not threaten God, do not resent God, do not let the devil lie to you that this waiting season it's punishment, because it's not. It's actually a really beautiful season when now you begin to have a different perspective and approach to it. And I hope that you can wait faithfully. I hope that this video has opened your eyes and changed how you're looking at things. And I hope that I can see you on the other side of your waiting season. And I hope that we can one day sit down and recount and tell a story time about now this season, the way I've told a story time from 2018. I hope that one day we can sit down and now narrate and speak of these seasons as a past season. And I hope for the same for you. And I hope that you get to experience that for yourself as well. And I hope this video has been a blessing, and I pray that it's a blessing, and it will be a blessing to anyone that you're going to share this link with. And until I can see you next time in our next video, it's Kwaheri from me. Bye.